wanted to come back to my research career, and for the last couple of years before I quit as dean, I started to get involved with this software lab. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Basically, I haven't been as involved as my colleague Terry Ryan. You can see him right there. There's another one of my former students, Don Voss and Charlie. We call him Sap. He's at NIDA, and good seeing you. Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad you could be here. So, and he knows that man well too. So Terry did a lot of the work in our lab, and now he's taken over as dean, and I'm giving talks in various universities to tell people what we've been doing and what kinds of things we're planning to do in the future. So our lab is essentially dedicated to understanding how people share knowledge through the computer, and it's got me all confused, through using I know I'm on the wrong slide. Through using software, and instead of in just face-to-face situations. So obviously, every time we converse, all of us as human beings, when we converse, we share knowledge. We share some kind of knowledge. It may be simple, it may be complex, it may take a lot of time. And most of us, at least people my age, we're only used to sharing knowledge in conversation, face-to-face conversation. Over the years, we've become more and more attuned to doing it through technology, right? And some of it's synchronous. We can talk on a phone, or we can text, which is effectively synchronous. We're going back and forth. Or some of it's asynchronous. We send email, and it might take some time to reply to email, or we might contribute to a blog, and the feedback isn't instant. So our focus is on the computer-supported part of knowledge sharing, and we're most interested in building software, or at least software innovations, to support this social learning. Now, maybe to put this in a more simple way, there are various contexts in which social learning, knowledge sharing takes place. And I've represented three in this diagram. The first is in educational settings like this, right? I mean, most people think of education as the place where we share, where we develop and share knowledge. It's kind of the focus of the educational process. So that obviously makes sense. But in organizations, any kind of organization, whether it's a business, whether it's in a non-government organization, whether it's in an educational organization, so there's some overlap there. Education is a process, but it's also an organization. Right? There's a bureaucracy in every educational institution. We have all the kinds of activities that go on in any other kind of organization. So in the organizational setting, we also share knowledge. How do we learn from each other? We have to share knowledge. If I don't become more attuned to what I need to do in my organization, then I'm not going to be productive. So I need to learn, and as I learn, I need to share that with other people. And then the third context is just society. In everyday life, we share knowledge. We might just do it in friendly conversation. We might do it as part of a small group. It might be something that's not formal, but a book club or something like that people get together. So there are communities of people who share knowledge. The idea is that we want to develop software innovations that let people cross the boundaries of these various contexts. So usually when we think about our schooling, or when we're going to school, we don't think about how we utilize the same kind of learning that we do in school to to use in our work or at home in a community setting. So, but we should be doing that. Why should we draw boundaries around where we're working or where we're going to school? So the idea is to develop software that will allow each person to have access to all of the different types of knowledge that they're developing or getting from other people. So just to also to frame this, there are many different kinds of social learning software. In fact, most people would say, well, that pretty much addresses every kind of software you can imagine. And it may be true. Maybe all software is social learning software. We don't have in here things like transaction systems, although CMS, which is I just couldn't fit it all in here, but course management system is I don't know if you use Blackboard or some kind of system here to manage your coursework. That's effectively a transaction system rather than a social learning software system. But if you have a discussion board, it becomes social learning software. So most people have heard of what I call the big four: wikis, blogs, discussion forums, and friendware, which most people now think of as Facebook or MySpace or Hi-Fi or whatever is used in different countries. And then a lot of people now are using Twitter type software, bookmarks, chats, SMS, and different kinds of multimedia. Most people in college and probably even beyond college and before are using games, virtual worlds like Second Life, and so on. So, and then in the educational institution, we've got e-portfolios, which I'll talk about in a little bit, course management systems, learning objects. So there's lots of software out there that supports social learning. And any of that software relates to what we're trying to do in our lab. Now, this is a title of a paper that a colleague and I did. This colleague actually is not part of our lab, but he was another former student of mine, and we've been doing some work together recently. And we sent this paper to see if we could get it published in a conference proceedings, but it didn't make it. We just found out last week that it was rejected. And I think it's because even the feedback in the paper said, it's too radical. But our premise is that if you apply software in any context, essentially what you try and do is what we call first order learning. In other words, you try and make the process where you introduce the software more effective, right? So the reason we use Blackboard is because it's easier for the faculty and the students to submit documents, to get grades, to put up a syllabus. It's just more efficient. It's easy, it's efficient, and sometimes it's effective. That's first order learning. We're doing what we used to do in education in a more effective or efficient way through software. But we argue that by doing that, by just limiting the way we look at software to that kind of first order learning, we're not enabling individuals to focus on that blue button that I talked about, the integration of knowledge sharing across contexts. Because if you just make something more efficient, you don't change the way you do things in a broader sense. So there's something called second order learning. Second order learning is taking what you've already done and reorganizing it in a different way to make it even more effective than you could through first order learning. And so we argue that by thinking of software as supporting communities rather than supporting courses, we have a better opportunity to allow people to integrate their knowledge. And so essentially those barriers in that three bubble